Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. I want to talk about a subject that I covered long ago in a video early on in this channel, but I think it's something that we need to talk about again. I was inspired to do this video by a fellow listener, viewer, whatever we're supposed to call them, subscriber, a couple that has moved close to my area, and my wife and I have become friends with them. We actually met with them this morning for breakfast and talked, and this was one of the things, excuse me, we've done a lot of talking today already, and my voice is starting to crackle a little. Anyways, this was one of the subjects that we talked about. And so I thought it would be a good time, especially while it's fresh in my memory, to bring it to you folks again. It's definitely good for you newbies, but for those of you that's been in preparedness world for a long time, you certainly need to be talking about this too. And that is, are you prepared for the psychological toll of living through an SHTF? Just because you're physically prepared for everything that you might face, if you're not psychologically prepared for it, that could be where you falter. Just think of what's happened over the past year. Some of you have been affected by this health crisis in different ways. For instance, here, there's been very little effect. For the most part, things have been fairly normal. You know, there in the beginning when it got really heated up, things changed a little bit, but they went back to normal pretty quickly. But I know that some of you, that's not been the case. And in fact, there have been many cases across the country of people committing suicide because of the psychological drain of what we're going through. And as sad as that is, the reality is it's not nearly as bad as it can be. And most likely it's going to get worse. And we, as preparedness-minded people, we need to get ourselves and our homes ready psychologically for this, and also prepare ourselves for dealing with people outside of our home that are not prepared for this psychologically. Not just the dealing with, say, a societal collapse, grid being down, supply chains being down, but other things that some of us wouldn't even think about. Dealing with not having the internet, cell phones. There's a lot of people that's going to be difficult for them to handle. What about medicines? How many people in this country take medicines? How many of those people take prescription medications that are antidepressant, that are psychotic type drugs? How will those people behave and react when they no longer can get them? And how will they be able to handle the world around them without those medications? These are some hard and maybe even dark realities of a world that is starting to collapse. And it's very possible, with the things that are happening, that we may in fact find ourselves living in that world. Just a week or so ago down in Texas, many places down there were without power for several days. And while it didn't fall into anarchy, I know for a fact, because I have family and friends that live down there, that in some areas it was starting to get a little on the hairy side. There were people that were becoming worried about finding food that they could eat and prepare because they didn't have any electricity to cook it. People that were worried about finding water because everything was froze up. People getting worried about freezing to death at night, being able to bathe, have a little bit of normalcy in their life. I think Texas was probably just a few days away from stuff getting pretty crazy if they hadn't got the power back on and agencies and volunteers and stuff hadn't stepped in. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. The vast majority of Americans have never experienced long-term power outages. Most young people, they freak out when their internet goes down for a little bit. Can you imagine if their internet just goes away? Um, how many people under, say, 25 years old can handle not having a cell phone for the rest of their life? Or even for just extended periods of time? And I know that sounds silly for some of us, especially those of us that grew up in a world that they didn't exist or didn't have them. But the reality is this is something that we may have to face and have to deal with. You may have to handle people within your own home that are not psychologically tolerating and handling and dealing with the world that they may be faced and forced to live in. And so we need to prepare ourselves for that. You may find yourself with neighbors around you that are kind of losing it. They're hungry. They're tired. They're thirsty. They haven't bathed in a few weeks. They haven't put clean clothes on in a few weeks. They don't know really where their next meal is going to come from. And they're just tired of it. They're tired of this new normal that they're living in. And they're at their breaking point. They haven't had their medications for a while. And they're now getting ready to do anything to find what they need. This is a subject that not everyone wants to face. And I think it's something that you need to. I think it's something that you need to think about this. Within your own home, you should try to do things and have things available to at least somewhat look normal. That should bring about a little bit of normalcy in your home. And also things to keep yourselves busy. A lot of people have this idea that especially a long-term SHTF, that you're going to constantly be busy doing patrols, hunting, fighting off marauders, and planting gardens. And while you may be doing some of those things and other things, I assure you there's going to be a lot of downtime. And it's those downtimes that's probably going to really get to people. Because nowadays, when people have downtime, what do? They turn their TV on or they sit in their phones. In an SHTF, in a downtime, there's not a whole lot. It's going to be silent. They may not even have electricity. And what are they going to have to entertain themselves? So you need to put things away and plan for the possibility of that so that you have things to keep your mind busy during downtime. Games, puzzles, stuff for the children to do, musical instruments, just things to keep yourselves busy. That's a very important part of keeping your mind healthy during a major apocalyptic or major catastrophe. This is something that happens even in today's world, where people go through power outages or they go through major storms and things that kind of disrupt the normal life for a while. It's those mundane times that really start to get to you. So the first thing you need to do, like I just said, is to come up with ways to keep people busy. And along with your preps, have puzzles and games and whatever it is that you can come up with to kind of keep things, keep your mind busy at home. And the other part of this is developing plans to deal with outsiders. Because it's very possible it could happen. Do you deal with the outsiders with a strong iron fist, closed door policy? Or do you handle with these outsiders with a little bit of compassion and try to help them? I can't tell you what to do. I do think that different situations will probably be handled differently. But in the end, you need to be prepared for that. My wife and I have discussed this. It's one thing when it's some creepy guy that comes on your property that, is hungry and needs help. But what if it's a child or a young person, a teenager? What do you do then? I know I'm speaking of extremes, but it's stuff that you need to talk about. It's things that you need to prepare for. Um, because living in a world without the conveniences and the things that we just are so used to. I mean, everyone is just used to going in and flipping a light switch on and it's working. You're used to picking up your phone and seeing the latest news or what some guy you work with or girl you work with ate for dinner or whatever it is that you do. You take that all away and add with it all the stress and the fears that go along with living in a SHTF, and it's going to be a lot to handle psychologically. And I would argue that even the most trained minds and skilled and practiced minds are going to struggle with it from time to time. So my advice is to start preparing for that in at least talking about it with your spouse, with your wife, planning by putting stuff aside to keep busy work. You know, the old saying, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. Um, there's a lot of truth to that. So do things to keep yourself busy. Even here on this homestead, and partly because we're kind of restrictive of what, internet and TV and things like that, our kids get bored sometimes. And you might say, how in the world can your kids get bored when you live on all this land and you have all these animals? They just do. Things become mundane after a while and they start to get bored. They get cabin fever. And so we have to change things up. We have to pull out different games, do something different. If add to that all the stress that would come through a SHTF, and it can be very dangerous. It can become deadly even. And this is something that I think some of you may not have really thought a lot about. Now, I'm not saying all this to scare you. I'm not trying to terrify you, hype this up, but I want to bring it to you so that you at least are aware of it and give it a little bit of thought. Because if something happens in the future, and all or part of those things that I've mentioned, those systems, those, things that make us feel normal, go away, there's definitely going to be some crazy times happening. And eventually, the psychological drain on people, at least for some, it's going to be overwhelming. And they may not handle it very well. And you may be the one to have to deal with those people. So, along with your preparedness plan, along with your plan on your homestead of how to be self-sufficient and how to survive through, all the things that you might face, you also need to plan for handling everything mentally. Are you prepared mentally to handle a world without a grocery store, without electricity, without internet, without a pharmacy, without being able to just go and do things, take a drive in the car, run to the city park, or, go on a vacation? Are you prepared for that? And I would encourage each of you to have that conversation or to entertain those thoughts and try to come up with ways that you can prepare yourself and your family to combat the mental stress of going through that. And I don't think it's as difficult as you think. I don't think that you're going to have to put a lot of money into this. It's really more of just preparing yourself mentally for dealing with that. And as far as dealing with outsiders, it's certainly something you need to think about. People joke about zombie apocalypse. And I'm not talking about a virus that causes zombies, but you take a lot of those things away that we've mentioned in this video, and I think a lot of regular American people, they're going to basically behave like zombies. And it could cause a pretty crazy scenario, and you need to be mentally prepared for that, to deal with people that are that way. So to wrap this video up, work on psychological preparedness. It's a necessary thing. Don't think that just because you're some tough guy or you've had military training or maybe even been in combat that you are absolutely prepared for this. And even if you are prepared for this, the people in your home may not be. So take the steps now to get yourself ready. I don't think the things that I'm talking about are that extreme, and I'm not saying they're all going to happen or they would all happen at once. But I do believe that there are possibilities along the way that we may be dealing with some extreme type of SHTF, a real down situation where grid or some type of infrastructure could potentially collapse and leave us with a lot of stress to deal with. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness for you to admit that and start preparations now to handle it. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.